then. What's going on, guys? It's Zex, and we're back, and it's been a while. So I was working on a different video about something I've been kind of hinting at. However, recently WCC dropped a video that is pretty interesting. It is titled "We Don't Need $3 Start Decks Anymore," in which the member WCC Kai goes and kind of states his argument that we don't really need a cheap entry-level product for Vanguard. We don't need a cheap entry-level product for Vanguard. His argument is primarily because the Start deck sets have done more for getting people into the game than the $3 start decks back in Start Overdress or the trial decks for Discount Try 3 did as well, because those were just mediocre as hell. And I agree with some of the things he does say. Pretty much, I think Stride deck sets have been good for Vanguard. I think having a out-of-the-box, ready-to-play, sleeve-up-and-go product is fantastic for the game, and it is very important to have it. I do not agree, however, with the statement that Cardfight Vanguard, more specifically, does not need a cheaper entry-level product. That is where I think that's where she's giving too much credit to the Strike deck sets. And really, this is more so because the Strike deck sets are really impactful, but we only really got there because the game is also increasing. So, to talk about more so about the $3 Strike deck set, the $3 the Start decks. The Start decks were built at a time in which, because of how late V-Series was going and decisions Bushiroad made, players and players, shops, shareholders, whatever you want to call it, the morale was at probably the lowest it's been, for lack of a better term. It's been the lowest it's been. And then Bushiroad's Kadani is about to go on stage on that upcoming product stream to announce all this information, to announce a whole new reboot, a whole new rotation, especially after how Luard and all the things that happened with this and COVID, and you're going to say, hey, we're going to rotate again. The purpose of the $3 start decks was not to just be an entry-level product. It was also as a sort of like an olive branch to players and shops to be like, hey, we know we messed up. Here is a product we're going to do. If you do invest, you will not take a hit if this fails. We will take the hit instead. We will take the L on your behalf. And it did work to that extent. It was never meant to be it was meant to be a start product, but it was also meant to be, please trust us. It was the olive branch the game needed to even get into the door. So that's the real reason. That's the purpose of the $3 start decks. And I say that worked. I think the whole thing about like year one Overdress not being too hot was because sets 1 to 3 were not good. Like, I don't know. Like, I think there was kind of forgetting. Like, set 1 was good. Set 2 and 3 were not. There was a lot of like jank in those sets that were just kind of like, wow, this is kind of lame. We were all even kind of like upset. It's like, man, why does it feel like Bruce is getting so much stronger than every other like deck? Like, the main character's deck is just kind of mid. Like, every other support card is whatever, everything. It wasn't even until like set 4 where like the game actually started to get interesting, and we finally started to ramp up, right? So that's the real thing. Like, it was not really the deck set, the start deck's fault. It was the fact that sets 2 and 3 weren't as impactful as set 1 was. That's really the issue. So it was never really the start deck's fault. And in terms of the trial deck, those trial decks were going to fail even they didn't have Elementary Sanctitude, because they were already filled on a on paper interesting idea, but the execution was terrible. Like, this way to be a different product that would be interesting. The problem is you then kind of just like butchered the deck, because the main boss units were just not great. Like you had, or rather they were shells of what they were supposed to be that got shoved into sets that they could have just been in the trial decks. You're paying extra money for this. How is it that all the bosses in the first 5 start decks were still relevant to this day, yet I'm paying more money for cards that quite literally, for a boss unit that quite literally is irrelevant? Like that's kind of what it is. The original Leonore, Youthberg, and Bejeweled are ass. They are actually not even real cards. I don't know if you're playing those cards. You literally are. You have no money. not I'm trying to be, trying to like shame people for like poor shame or anything. Nothing like that. No, I'm more saying like, if you're playing them, you're playing a very, very budget variant of those decks, and you're playing this out the box, but they're not really great for, playing the game, right? I feel like I've just messed up that whole argument. I'm sorry, but my point is that those trial decks were just terrible. They weren't great products, and I completely agree on that. My thing is, yes, you have these great entry products in the Stride deck sets and the Super Set, but you still need cheaper alternatives for people to get into the game or be interested in these, new mechanics. In fact, I'm going to show you something right now. So, give me just a second. So, he talked about primarily Digimon, Pokemon, the big 3 and whatnot. So, let's kind of go over a bit. So, this is all the Digimon stuff that is right here. So, right, you have, like, we know specifically this Bizamon events deck set. I bought this. I don't play Digimon. I just don't really like the game. But I bought this because I was like, yeah, this seems pretty cool. Around $20, maybe $30, depending on where you are. Right? It comes with a deck that comes, it comes with 54 cards, 9 additional cards, 2 memory gauges, 60 sleeves. Whole sleeves, a deck, extra cards, and gauges to play the deck straight up. Right? That's a very good starter product, and it's one of the, I believe it's one of the best decks in the format. However, that does not mean they did not just release other products, right? You have Ragnarlone, which is probably the most recent starter up until that point. You have all these other starter sets. You have Gallantmon, the original starter decks. You have the Ancient Dragon, Power World Tactician. You have all these extra cards. And then if I can go here, you have the upcoming 15 and 16, which are also going to be, starter decks around this point. This is what's it say? Game Academia, which is a there's a lot more Japanese imports, so this is kind of like an import rather than just being kind of the normal thing. So that's different. Probably gonna be much different when these actually come out in English. But the point still stands is that they're still making cheaper products. So that's the whole thing. We then go on to Pokemon. Pokemon, he also puts out the League Battle deck. For example, like the Palkia 1 drop, that's like $20, right? You put 2 together, bam, you have a water deck ready to go. The Calyrex one, the Mew's somewhere around here, but I don't really want to go and find it. But yeah, you have more other stuff too. So, for example, Ampharos, you have these little battle decks that actually do kind of have stuff you need, right? Ready to play 6-card deck, rules booklet, format, counters, coin, a deck box, strategy, code to play this deck online, to put it into the TCG Live to actually be played, online, and that's also important. So there's a means to having a cheaper entry product because of one real thing, and that is Kai takes it and looks at it from a competitive point, which is great. But I'm looking more of this not just as a competitive player, but also a casual player. And I think that's the part that I think Kai misses in his argument about this, is that you'll have to also think about the casual players as well. You need to have multiple varying levels of entry to the game in its current form. You can't just have, oh, here is this $50 deck. You can't just go to a player who wants to say, hey, I want to try Vanguard. Wait, how to play? Do you have $50? No, I don't. Well, too bad. You can't play the game, buddy. See ya. Bye. Like, you can't do that. Right? It shouldn't be done that. And it's not like Vanguard has done this before. Like, we talk about how G was a top tier era for the game. So let's go and look at what G did, right? So for example, one of the big things G did was it dropped trial decks left and right. Decks that cost $10, $15, and they just dropped them left and right. For example, at the start of G, we started with the Chrono deck, we started with All Mile, we started with Asha. These three always there. Got you in the G format, $15. Bam. Yeah, you might have to buy two for $30, but that's still $30. To have all the main cards done, that's still $30. That's cool. And then what else did they do? In set 2, they dropped the Aquaforce trial deck. In set 3, they dropped the Messiah trial, the first Messiah trial deck. You know, when we got to Gears Crisis, they released a redo of the Gear Congo trial deck, but this time had Time Leap in it. You know, Time Leap, one of the best decks of all time in Vanguard, arguably. You know, you have Metallica Phoenix, it had History Maker, had pretty critical pieces to the deck to this day that you could argue were still necessary if you want to play it. Also, at the same time, released Illusions of Crescent Moon. You had Hari, you introduced Pale Moon back in G. You know, you have a cute girl that, you know, cute girl to kind of spend to say, hey, you want to play Pale Moon with a waifu? Go ahead, right? Then in the middle of Gears Crisis, you release Night Rose. You know, also another one of the best decks of all time. You know, the base core in here with another cute girl on the line, right? Straight up, right? Out of the trial decks, you then create a core that was important for the game's, you know, to some of the strongest decks in the game, right? Then we go into Zoya Time Beast for G next, right? You got Zoya Time Beast pieces that are pretty important for a lot of different decks in Gear Chronicle. Then later you get the Ritual Dragon Sorcery, which is Luar, you know, the card that killed the game. Sorry, I don't know why I did that. But yeah, you have Luar right here, right? A critical card that's going to be coming back into Overdress soon. Bam, right there, right? Then you have a redo of the G trial decks, which, you know, of draw checks. This time for Alma and Asha, they get a retrain too, reprints of their original units as well as new cards that are also pretty cool for their decks. Then next you have UI Sovereign, which was freaking Nubatama releasing Shiranui, releasing Dominate, another like crazy deck in the game, right? That's also coming in Overdress. That's important too. Then you have Debut to Divas, which released Choo Choo, which is also important for that deck as well. Bam. You know, important for Bermuda Triangle. Gabe's Bermuda Triangle, finally a trial deck, a key way to actually like get into the game for people who want to play Bermuda Triangle but have to basically like buy just boosters non-stop, right? That's good. Set 15, you know, and the last like real main trial deck was the second Messiah one that was in GZ, right? I mean, for crying out loud, even Toku Rambu got a trial deck when they released. They were the first collab. They got a trial deck. You had all these eras just dumped through trial decks. That was, right, 15 trial decks. 15 trial decks in Toku Rambu. And then even when there weren't trial decks, the one series that did not release a trial deck was Stridegate. However, Stridegate was when start decks were actually created, right? Start decks. So we had the first start deck, which really wasn't anything. It was just a bunch of just mediocre cards that were just, you know, just dumped in for Gear Chronicle. But the second start deck is important because this start deck came out when Stride Gate happened, and this was the Night of the Sun start deck. And this one had introduced a lot more Unite cards. It did a Gurgwit reprint with alternate art, by the way. This is an alternate art. So it gave you a Gurgwit alternate art. It gave you a basis for playing Unite. It gave you some new cards, right? It gave you a reprint of the Stride Fodder, which is getting expensive, and it gave you one of the best starters in the game. Oh yeah, and reprinted a signature crit in the game, right? One of the best starters in Gold Paladin, one of the most expensive crits in Gold Paladin, the Stride Fodder Gold Paladin, and retrained its signature boss. And this was just in a $5 start deck. This was a signature. This is probably better. This is theoretically almost better than the original $3 start decks we got for Overdress. Right? Key cards that see play arguably to this day in a second thing. So it's like, man, this looks really cool. And this was $5 too. So it's not like you can't have a entry-level product in Vanguard that isn't just great. And even then, let's also talk about the biggest thing about the equivalent to Stride deck sets back in G, the Legend decks, right? We had 3 Legend decks, right? Inside them, you had all this stuff. You had a new deck, you had a counter, you had a deck box, and you had a promo card that was reprinted. Bam. And what was in this product? A pretty crazy card known as Phantom Blaster Diablo. A card that pretty much single-handedly made Shadow Paladin like meta for a good chunk of time. Right? You had Blaster Dark Diablo, you had Shanan Researched, you had Darkheart, right? You had a Howl Owl, you had a bunch of other cards. Like this deck was pretty much $25-$30 on release too, but had one of the most powerful cards ever printed in it, and it was half the price of a Stride deck set for it. And to even prove that you can have them both allowed at the same time, Legend Deck 2 released the same time as like a week later from Night of the Sun, right? April 29th, April 22nd, literally a week later, they released this around the same time. So it's not like you can't have these two there. And what did this also contain? 2 copies of Dragon Goblor the Ace, one of the most powerful Dragon Goblor cards, released in a Fighters Collection, reprinted for this deck. Also including some of the most influential cards, right? It gave it a first stride that gave Kagura a very, very much better first stride. It gave a pretty nice finisher. It gave Conroe, which is a fantastic grade 1. It gave Nahalem, which is a very, very strong beater. Did a lot of reprints, had just general cheaper cards everywhere. It was fantastic, right? And then even then, we then eventually got the Blaster, Aichi Sendo, right? Came out with G Guardians too, right? Like, let's even look at the card list right here, right? You came with Assault, which is a great G Guard for blasters. You had Alfred Holy Saber, which is a good card. You had Myriad Soul Saber, which is also good. Blaster Blade Exceed, Key Piece. The first real reprint of Blaster Blade in years, probably since its first release, was a Blaster Blade reprint. Not only that, it also came with a Epona, which is a alternate art, a functional retrain. A functional reprint of the Holy Guard that was the Counter-Charge PG. So you had that. You had all these other cards. You had a Margot reprint. So many good ideas that were in the same period as the Stride deck set, but cost half the price. So it's not like you can't have these cards, right? I'm gonna put out Build Divide again. Why? Because despite the fact that Build Divide is in perpetual gulag right now, guess what? Set 1, set 2, you had 2 trial decks. They released 2 trial decks every single like segment. 1 and 2, bam. 3 and 4 for season 2. You had a Kimetsu no Yaiba trial deck. 5 and 6 released in the post-anime era, and 7 and 8 released very recently. So it's not like you can't have these. They're pumping out trial decks because they want people in their game. That is, you know, arguably cheap, you know, cheap-ish compared to. Let me pull it up. Chronojet. Let's see. Not Chronojet. Chronojet. Not Chronojet. Oh my goodness. Compared to the Chronojet deck, right? Let's go to Stride decks of Chronojet, right? Let's look at the actual high to low on the actual Stride deck set. $70 on the secondary market. Marketplace $68, right? You literally, I could pretty much buy three Build Divide start decks, trial decks off of this right here. In equivalent, I could also buy 2 of these, have multiple reprints of Blaster Blade, have a whole full version of this deck, more hollowed out than anything. I could have a full play set of Kagero with Dragon Ball the Ace. Ace reprinted. Bam, done, easy, complete. And that is important. That's the argument I'm trying to really make here, is that this is a good product, but it's not like we can't have more of these products that are just cheap, ready to go completely, right? Things that you can go into a card shop, look on the shelf, see a Vanguard trial deck that has decently amount of like competitively viable cards, and go, hey, that looks cool, I want to try it out. See its price like $5-10, like, okay, I'll cop one. Give me a pack of sleeves or some extra sleeves to have in my thing. Sleeve them up. Say, hey, anyone here that plays Vanguard want to help me learn? Bam! You know, at that point, it's really more so just like, you know, 50-50 on whether or not your locals is good. But that is important. That is always important. There's a reason why Pokemon hasn't stopped doing that, but the fact they have the Battle League stuff. They have starter decks. They have these battle decks and things. Magic still releases those, even though literally no one cares. Yu-Gi-Oh! Still, like, let's go to Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's double check Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. What actually released recently, which is the, if I can find it, go to this set right here, right? Legend of the Crystal Beast. This structure deck released. And you know what? Guess what it had? Reprints of signature cards. Ash, Ghost Bell, Crystal Bonnie, critical piece of Crystal Beast, Dimension Shifter. You know, general reprints while also having cards that worked for Crystal Beast. They're critical pieces, old and new. This one thing is $7.38. I can cop Ash for $3 now. Congratulations. But why is that important? Because not only that, this is also something that allowed me, right? When this released, it not only allowed me to play Rainbow Dragon Turbo, but also gave me the pieces to also do something like Conclave Control. You know, 2 very, very decent roguish options, right? And that's really important too, right? The Traptrix structure deck also came out, right? Beware Traptrix, right here. This thing is looking at like, what, $3 now? Because of it, it is still like a pretty decent deck, right? Or, excuse me, $14 on, who the hell is, man, $3.96 for this? What? Oh, that is, that's awkward. Long story short is, this is, stuff like this is still important to the game. You can have your Battle League decks, but you can also have your EX battle decks. They are not mutually exclusive. They are very important for the health of a game to have old players and new players in. I understand, you know, well, I understand the whole thing as well. They're not like ready to go out the gate, right? You didn't have to spend extra money. And I was like, yeah, I get that. That's perfectly fine. But I'm not, the whole point is very critical, and I kind of want to show you this. And this will probably be the last bit here if I can find it. So, if you don't know what this is, these are the numbers for EVO 2023. They just came out a couple days ago. Street Fighter 6 very really just released and has 7,000 attendance, the most in the entire tournament series history. Why? Because Street Fighter did something that most fighting games don't do. Very similar to Guilty Gear Strive here, and it's also important. They allowed you to get in the door. Street Fighter has its classic system, which is very much for, you know, players who have played Street Fighter or played fighting games before and just want to play as hard as they can. But they also have modern, which is how people who can't do that are also able to play. Right? The idea is, at the end of the day, can you get in the door? And that matters to me more than whether or not you can pick up one product and go play a tournament. I want you to pick up a product and play the game. That, to me, matters just as much. Yeah, I got nothing else to say. Yeah, this took way longer than I thought. Most of it because I just kind of like fumbled the last back half. But thank you so much for watching. If you would like to, support everything, please like, comment, and share. Like, comment, subscribe. Share this video. Kind of, start a little dialogue. I'm not doing this to, just because I'm not doing this to attack Kai or anything. I'm doing this to more so just kind of like take a look at the state of the, what makes, what's a good starter for people getting into a game or returning to a game. And I think a lot of that is important, is having varying levels of being able to access the game. That's the real long story short of it all. Right? So thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.